and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sara, and I am so thrilled that we are joined by Spencer and Gabe from Fantasy Files to talk about Dean Koontz book.
How's it going?
Hello, Gabe, you're here too.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was going to say more. Yes, I'm here. Hi, guys. How's it going? How's everybody doing today?
I'm glad that you were able to make it this time.
Yes, me too.
We missed you last time.
I know. I'm super happy that we're here.
We had to complain about the gunslinger without you.
Yeah. You know, it's Spencer he read it and I was not as far or whatever in the book. And he's like, man, just don't. You don't have to finish it. It's all good. And so it was funny. I was like, all right, well.
And I was almost finished and I was like, there's no way that Gabe is enjoying this. And so I texted him and I was like, I bet that you're not liking this at all, are you? And he's
he gave me the mercy. He's like, just stop. And I was like, okay.
You're like, thank God.
Yeah.
Well, you would have fit in.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I heard. That's what he said. So,
but tonight we're discussing a very different book. We are going to be talking about Soul Survivor by Dean Koontz. And before we get into that, what is something great that happened recently for everyone? Sara, I'm picking on you.
Okay, something great that happened is at work, we have been doing this big project to migrate all of our code to Amazon Web Services. That's probably more detail than anyone cares about, but a big portion of it went live this week very successfully. We didn't have to roll it back. We didn't have to frantically fix things. So that is my good thing for this week.
That's
nice.
Very good.
And am I next?
You can be if you have something.
All right, I'll go. Yeah. So today we wanted to do a dinner tonight with my girlfriend's family. Her mom and brother come over. So I was like, all right, let's do burgers. I'll grill up some burgers. So we go half an hour to the store. We're picking out everything, get up to the register, right? We check everything out. And I open my wallet and I don't have my card.
Oh no.
So I'm like, oh my gosh. And she didn't have her card either. We were screwed. And this gentleman behind us said, no, I'll pay for it. I'll pay for the whole thing. It was $85.
Whoa.
He paid for the whole thing. So shout out to that guy in Safeway in Port Orchard. You are the best.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
That's amazing. People are fantastic.
Yeah, it was super nice. I was really shocked, and it was just utter kindness,
Wow.
It was really cool.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That is a very good thing.
Yes.
So for me, I know that I'm an adult now because
oh, this is always a good start to something.
Today I bought a coffee table for my house and I am super fucking excited about it. And it wasn't until after getting it into the house and being super excited and taking a picture of it and everything that I realized, oh, is this what it means to be old? Am I old now? I'm just so stoked about this coffee table. Really? So, yeah, that's my happy thing for the week.
That's awesome.
That is a sign of age, though, I'm afraid.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, my good thing is kind of qualified because it starts with a bad thing, which is one of my cats was missing a patch of fur on her back, which obviously sent me into a tailspin of panic.
Yeah.
Took her to the vet. Everything's fine. She was just doing dumb cat stuff. But they took a test to make sure it wasn't an infection or ringworm or something. And so I got the test results back that, no, it's nothing. I'm just being anxious, which is the best news ever.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. She's just a dumb cat.
So did you ever figure out how it was missing? Did you just lick that spot a whole bunch or?
It's between her shoulder blades.
Oh,
so she can't reach it.
So did Bard lick that spot a lot?
Interesting. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to ask next.
I mean, technically maybe, but she's the feisty one. She would never let our other cat
do that.
She would just smack him. So it's a mystery. Something in our house she wiggled under and scraped some fur off, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's healing now. Everything's fine. So
that's good.
Just cat stuff. So what is everyone drinking tonight? I'm having a Vizzy hard seltzer and it's mimosa flavored. and it is probably the silliest thing and most delicious thing in the world.
I've seen those around, and I've never ever tried one. They have a lot of other flavors too, right? The Vizzy brand.
Yeah.
So yeah, are they worth it?
I've only had the mimosa ones from them. I drink a lot of hard seltzers though.
Yeah.
I like this version because it's not super sweet, but it's still like nice.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Does it taste like mimosa?
I mean, it's got real orange juice in it. Barely, but a little bit. It's like a whole 2%.
Yeah.
That's great.
I am drinking Blindwood cider as usual, my go-to cider.
Is it a hard apple cider or is it like a...
Yeah, it's a hard apple cider. Blindwood is a local producer.
Oh, cool.
They're it's like a family business in the Bay Area, and they hand deliver their cider. They're so sweet. I love them dearly. And their cider is really good too.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome.
We're practically their official sponsor at this point. How much Sara talks about them.
I feel like I should be getting free cider given how much I talk about them.
Yeah.
We should try to negotiate this. How many listens do we get?
They do not listen to our podcast. Next time Drew delivers, I'll tell him that I've been shilling for him.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, get like a sponsored ad read or get them to tweet out your podcast or something.
Yes.
So what am I drinking?
He's
Ninsky Brewing Solar Cruiser. And this is a beer. Do you guys know Jim from Fantasy for the Ages podcast?
Mm-hmm.
He was over in Idaho maybe a couple weeks ago, and he brought over a 6-pack of this stuff. He came by and we just hung out, and he brought a 6-pack of this, and it's become kind of my new favorite beer. There's the Solar Cruiser, which is the really, really pale one. And then there's one, I forget what it's called, but it has a red label, and it's kind of like the next, it's like a medium. Both of those are really, really good. So
nice.
And then I also over here, I have, because I couldn't make up my mind on what to get. And I got just a Blue Moon.
Oh, yeah.
Belgian white. And if I finish this one, I'll probably crack that one at some point. But
that's how you know you're on fiction fans.
Yeah.
So I am drinking Elysian Brewing Company, which is my favorite. They're pretty big, so it's kind of generic. But Space Dust IPA is by far my favorite, and also what I'm drinking.
Nice.
They're not just big; they're also local. So
that's true. Yep.
Yeah. you gotta use
true.
that.
Yes, definitely.
Points.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You can lean into that.
Yeah. Yeah. Local draft here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did not know Elysian was local to
Seattle,
to Washington. Okay, cool.
At least I'm pretty sure it's Seattle. Yeah, it is Seattle. Yeah.
Have you tried the Dank Dust by Elysian?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes. I had it with you that one time.
Okay.
Super good.
Yeah.
It's my thing about it though, is it's literally, they call it dank dust. And when you take the first sip, it's marijuana.
It tastes like weed.
Seriously. And I'm I don't know if it tastes great, but I'm just weirded out. My senses are confused. This is not what should be happening, but it is really good though.
Yeah.
And their men's room original red is also super good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did you say that their beer was called Men's Room?
Yes.
It is. Yes.
So Men's Room in Seattle, it's a radio show that they do.
Okay, so it's
in
not
the greater Seattle area. No, it's not.
a toilet.
Yeah, not a toilet. That's the name of their show, and it's a really good show. Super funny. I try and listen to it almost every day.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. On my way to work.
Nice.
Well, this is actually a book podcast. I know you might not have been able to tell from all of our conversation until now. So, has anyone read anything good lately? I'll start. No. Well, other than podcast books, of course.
I was going to say, what about this book?
Yeah.
We're about to talk about that for a whole hour.
That's true.
Doesn't count. I am still reading Terry Pratchett, A Life with Footnotes, which is Terry Pratchett's official biography written by his longtime assistant. And it continues to be excellent.
Does it have footnotes?
Yes, it has a lot of footnotes.
Good.
Actually, I am really impressed by how good of a writer Rob Wilkins is. I know that he was Terry Pratchett's personal assistant, but that obviously doesn't necessarily translate to writing skills.
Mm-hmm.
But he's really engaging and funny, and there are lots of footnotes. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Wonderful.
Sweet.
Nice. So I have been reading the Kingstark Tidings new book 5 in Kingstark Tidings. And we just kind of finished that as a podcast about a week ago. And then we had the author on, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I absolutely love those books. Just finished the 5th one. And then I got back into the Expanse books. And have you guys read the Expanse?
I watched the show, which I'm told is pretty close. Yeah. But I know it's not the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. The show is really close to the books. So there's 9 books total. And I just finished the 8th one.
Oh, damn.
So I'm like, oh man, I only have one more book to go. And I'm so nervous and equally nervous and hopeful that it's going to be great. But I'm nervous because like, it's the end of the series. And so I won't have any more of them. And I love that series so much. So Monday, I start the 9th book. And I'm super excited for that.
Sweet. So the only really new thing that I've, other than podcast stuff, which I also read Demons and Dragons, which is the 5th book of KDT. On my own, though, I read, it's called the Traveler's Gate Trilogy. It's by Will White.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm super bad at explaining books, but I do have the summary here that's pretty short if you guys want to hear it.
I think this is the first time that I've realized that Will White has a series that's not Cradle.
Right.
Yeah. And that's probably going to be my next thing because like everybody's like, you need to read Cradle. If you like these, read Cradle. But here's the little synopsis thing. It says Simon can only watch helpless as his family is killed and his village destroyed by the enemy travelers, men and women who can summon mystical powers from otherworldly territories. To top it off, one of Simon's friends is revealed as a savior prophesied to destroy evil and save the realm. Prophecy has nothing to say about Simon. He has no special powers, no magical weapons, and no guarantee that he'll survive. But he sets off alone and unarmed to earn the power he needs to oppose the travelers and topple their ruthless overlord. It may not be his destiny, but Simon is determined to save the day anyway. That does sum it up for the most part. It was a great read. A lot of really cool magic. The whole magic idea with, travelers, they have these territories which they can like master and then summon powers from the territory and use them. I think there's like 6 territories. Yeah, it was great.
I love that it's sort of the following the non-chosen one.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
Yes. Yep.
That sounds like you can do so much with that storyline that it hasn't been done a million times before.
Exactly. Little less tropey for sure.
I've often said I would love to see like a fantasy book that it's not even about like some like big epic story or anything. It's just like a slice of life in some fantasy character's life. Like I know Legends and Lattes is one that people really like that is kind of like that.
Yeah, I would say it's not necessarily slice of life because there are some big dramatic things that happen.
I'd say it's the main character is trying to settle down after adventuring, but there's still some echoes.
Yeah, right. It's definitely like more along that cozy fantasy genre.
That's cool. So did you finish that book?
I did.
What's the book called? House of Blades? House of Leaves?
There's 3. So House of Blades is the first one, I think, then the Crimson Vault, and then...
So did you finish it?
Yeah, I finished all 3 books, yes.
Oh, really?
Through and through. I finished the whole trilogy.
Oh, shit. I didn't hear that. Oh, my God.
The whole trilogy. And it was good. It's a really good trilogy.
Okay, cool.
I would recommend it. I think that, I don't know if you would like it, but I would say that like you would like this book more than like you would have liked my other recommendations, such as like The Land or those other ones. I think this is way more up your alley, like story wise.
Okay.
And kind of plot wise, I guess. So yeah.
Okay, cool.
I realized that I lied. I read an article today about apparently they're making a movie adaptation of a book that was originally I forgot their names. I want to say Daisy, but that's the actress's name. The the new Star Wars ones.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
They're making an adaptation of the new Star Wars movies?
No, fan fiction about the new Star Wars movies is getting a movie adaptation.
Oh, that's cool.
If Harry Styles fan fiction has gotten a movie adaptation, I don't see why Star Wars fan fiction can't.
Wait, Harry Styles fan fiction got a movie adaptation?
I heard about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure And I don't remember what movie it was, but I'm pretty sure that there was a movie that came out a couple of years ago that was based on a Harry Styles movie. It might have been the one where like the main character was sold to Harry Styles or something.
There's some weird ass fan fiction out there, you guys, just to warn you.
There's some weird ass fan fiction.
That's weird. Are you guys are you watching House of the Dragon?
No.
Oh,
I don't even. What is that?
It's the new Game of Thrones show.
Oh yeah, no, I have not seen that. I've never even seen the original Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, it's so good. Like I finished. I think there's 7 episodes out now, and I finished the 5th one last night. And or no, I finished the 4th one last night, and it's so good.
Apparently, this is a side note. Sorry to interrupt. Apparently, there are 2 Harry Styles fan fiction movies.
What?
There was After, which was released in 2019, and The Idea of You, starring Anne Hathaway,
Oh my God.
is coming at some point in the future.
Wow.
Whoa.
So this movie is based on Ren Kylo fan fiction.
Okay.
No, not Ray. Sorry, Ray
Yeah.
Kylo. Clearly,
Ray.
I'm a Star Wars fan. Yeah.
Raylo, yes.
Raylo,
obviously.
yeah.
Raylo.
But I mean, obviously, the OG 50 Shades of Grey, which was Twilight fan fiction, and I mean, really, Cassandra Clare is the true OG if we're talking about fan fiction that gets legitimized.
Wait, was 50 Shades of Grey Twilight fan fiction?
Yes.
Like legitimately?
Yeah.
Yes. She just like searched and replaced the character names basically. And
But
to make
the
it,
guy's not a vampire or anything, is he?
that's the beauty of fan fiction.
It was. I think the fan fiction was like alternate universe.
So it has nothing to do with Twilight.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
We'll explain all of fan fiction's ins and outs to you later.
Okay.
I think that might take longer than we have this evening.
Yeah.
That was a tangent. So we're actually here to talk about Soul Survivor by Dean Koontz, which is not fan fiction of any kind.
And I have to say, I was a little skeptical when I first picked this book up. I was like, well, it's a thriller. It's not my usual genre. I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy it. I really didn't enjoy Sphere by Michael Crichton, which we read last year, which was also kind of similar genre. But I really enjoyed Soul Survivor.
I'm glad.
I thought it was quite good.
I'm glad to.
I am a thriller fan, so it takes a lot for me to dislike a book, and this one was extra good. I realized that I accidentally qualified that the wrong direction. This book was very good. I enjoyed it immensely.
Nice. Yeah. Soul Survivor is, and I don't expect everyone to feel this way, obviously, but Soul Survivor is like one of my favorite single books of all time. I've read this book a bunch of times, and I found it when I was in like a really kind of dark and tragic point in my life. And so I kind of like empathized with the main character in that kind of way. And just like the themes of this book, and of course, like the big reveal and just like the whole feeling that this book gives you. This book gives you a vibe, right? Like the whole time that you're going through this book, there's kind of like this just emotional, what am I trying to say? Like it gives you this feeling that permeates throughout the entire book, like this very like creepy, paranoid kind of. Did you guys feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, the emotions involved, or at least to me, they're like devastating emotions, man. Like very, very sad, very powerful, very moving emotions that are tied throughout the whole book.
Yeah.
And I think that really elevates the book as a whole.
That really emphasizes the feelings of paranoia that we see the main character, Joe Carpenter, like experience.
Yeah.
Because he is going through these very strong like emotions of grief, but he's also at the same time very paranoid because of circumstances. And it just kind of like they really like spotlight each other in a way.
Yeah.
It also gives you a different access point to the book because like I've never been hunted by a secret organization. I don't think that's a spoiler.
Yeah.
That comes up pretty early in the book.
Oh yeah.
But just the very human experience of grieving and loss is something that I think everyone can identify with to at least some extent. Hopefully most people haven't lost their entire like immediate family, wife and 2 children like Joe Carpenter does. But just having this like very relatable, heart-wrenching description of his emotions and then this like crazy high octane at some points adventure action chase. Like you really get both, and they bounce off of each other, like Sara said.
I also think that the aspect of grief, like what Joe is going through, is kind of what elevates this book from any other thriller to something memorable and worth reading, because
rereading. Thrillers are worth reading, Sara.
Okay. Well, I mean, worth reading over any other thriller.
Okay.
Because this element of grief is so beautifully depicted and feels so raw and relevant and not just like a plot point.
Yeah.
That I think it's really well done, and it really makes you feel for Joe as a character, and it makes you feel invested in his storyline. I mean, obviously, like with a thriller, sure, you're invested in the main character regardless, but like I think this brings it kind of like to a deeper level.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of thrillers that I've read, and even some of Dean Koontz's other books, the main character has kind of felt like one-dimensional in a lot of ways, because the story is mostly focused on these weird things that are happening, a conspiracy or like some sort of deep like government plot or something. Or even if it's not government related, sometimes there's just like, there's some sort of villain who's after the main guy, and that's mostly what the book revolves around. But in this, like you said, the main character is there's so many different sides to him, and we see the anger, we see the regret, we see the aching and longing for his family. And in this first scene, when we open up the book, and this, I'm not going into spoilers or anything, but like the first couple pages, like we see that where he pulls over on the freeway and he's kind of seeing the whole plane crash in his head. And it really tells you a lot about what kind of state Joe Carpenter is in and how he's handling the whole death of his family and everything.
I think you get a really good sense of him as a human being versus just him as an action hero.
Right. Mm-hmm. For sure.
I was really impressed too with the characterization of his wife and two daughters, who are actually never present in the book because they've passed away a year before the book starts. And so I thought, okay, it's just going to be like the people in his life that made him who he is. But they actually feel like real people. And that just makes you miss them more on his behalf.
Yeah. And also they're described at points in detail to whereas like, at least when I was listening and reading, I was like, I fully picture this scenario and I fully picture what they look like, the mouth, everything, the smile, all of it was documented, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think that even though they're never like, besides like a couple little flashbacks, they're never like directly there. I feel like their like presence kind of permeates throughout the whole thing. Like he's always thinking about his family. He's always like remembering things that they would do and what kind of people they were. And I feel like that kind of like, spreads throughout the rest of the book, where they do feel like a presence. They do feel like people that as well as the reader.
Yeah. I also think that a lot of the times when a character has a dead wife or a dead family, you don't really get a sense of the impact that person had on their life and on their like formation as a human being. And we hear a lot in Soul Survivor about how Joe is a better person because of Michelle. And like, you really get a tangible sense of what their relationship meant to him.
Yeah.
Which is more than I think you get oftentimes with this kind of backstory. Yeah. So like, that was another thing that I really appreciated.
Yeah.
And I think it gave more depth to all of the characters involved, really.
Definitely.
We also see a lot of other relationships in the book, and they're all framed sort of through this loss because, Joe is horribly missing his wife, and then he has to watch this couple who are still with each other. And it was really poignant to me that this is a thriller that doesn't fall back on the sometimes very cheap, I don't know. Abusive relationships are scary, but sometimes it's nice to read a book that doesn't have that in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a lot of people who are not necessarily happy, but happy with each other. And
Right.
how that still like just dug the knife in even farther for poor Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I also liked, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with finding happiness once your spouse is gone, like finding new happiness. But I liked that Joe didn't fall into bed with anyone else. Like he
Yeah.
was still very dedicated to Michelle. Again, not that there's anything wrong with starting a new relationship, but it
can
It's
get
just kind of
tropey.
cliche.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, like it can get tropey. It can be cliched. And there was none of that in this book.
Yeah.
I think Koontz also did a very admirable job at representation. Some of his phrasing was a little dated
Sure.
and maybe a little cringy, but it really felt like he was doing the best with the vocabulary he had available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, like I said, I went in expecting Michael Crichton. So I was very pleasantly surprised when I got Dean Koontz.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, this is not really plot related at all, but I grew up in Southern California, not in LA, but definitely seeing some of these place names was like, oh, I've been
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I mean, even I felt like that, and I didn't grow up in Southern California. I just visited on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah, but I mean, you've been to Big Bear.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I've been to Big Bear. I know that drive. I think that Koontz actually like knows Southern California more than just
He lives there.
yeah.
Yeah. There's certain points where I'm like, oh, I really want to like go visit that and see not necessarily like how it lines up with the book, but if I get like the same feeling from it that I got from the book, like when he's walking down that boardwalk and he throws his like McDonald's bag into the fire. There's all the campfires all along the beach and stuff. In my head, I like picture it a certain way. I'm like, I would love to figure out like where that is or where that was supposed to be and see it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are some dated moments in this book. It came out in 1997.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so not that long ago, but pretty long ago.
25 years.
Yeah.
And I definitely had to pause a few times and laugh to myself at especially the technology. Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
At one point, he marvels that they must have a map of the entire Los Angeles area, maybe even all of Southern California on a CD-ROM. These advanced, like, super spies must have all those streets on a CD. And I was like, oh no.
That's great.
Yeah, some of the technology was just kind of you had to laugh.
I mean, it wasn't wrong. It was just old.
It wasn't wrong for the time. Yeah. Like it's not that he got anything wrong. It's just that we're reading this from 25 years later when technology has made such drastic advances comparatively.
Well, I kind of like that about, you know, older books, even books that were put out in like the early 2000s and stuff, because at this point where we're at now, it feels kind of like a period piece, which I really like. And so anytime like a VHS gets mentioned or something like that, I'm like, oh, it kind of takes me back a little bit.
At one point, he's going to the airport and he comments that he was there an hour early, and that's so long, and he has such a long time to wait. And I'm like, oh man, I miss those days.
Yeah, for real.
He orders copies. No, dude, you hit print on the computer.
Yep.
And then, of course, the payphones. That doesn't feel quite so jarring to me.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. Because I was born when this book came out, so like I didn't see a whole lot of VHS or even the other kinds of stuff. You know, it wasn't really a part of my thing. But when I think about payphones, even to this day, I'm like, there's still payphones. Like people still use payphones.
I don't know. Are there still payphones?
Oh yeah, there's still payphones. They're
really?
not like around, but I've seen payphones. So put the quarters in. I've used one.
Did you feel like you were transported to another era?
Yeah. I was like, where am I right now?
I don't know. Maybe Gabe will remember this, but do you guys remember like the phone booths? Like in Seattle and stuff, like those blue and gray phone booths that were owned by, I think, Comcast or AT&T or something.
Yeah, when I think of phone booths, I think like London, the red, like
Yeah.
Doctor
typical
Who.
phone. Yeah, Doctor
Yeah.
Who, exactly.
Yeah.
That's all I can picture with those.
Well, unfortunately, I'm kind of out of non-spoiler things to talk about because this book is very good and I would hate
Yeah.
for someone to miss out on one of the great twists and
Yes.
turns.
Okay, but before we talk about spoiler stuff, I do want to say, and we've kind of covered this a little bit with representation, but I do want to point out that I really enjoyed how Koontz describes men in the way that women are often described. So like he
Yes.
talks about sensual mouths, for
Yeah.
example. And it was just a really refreshing change to see that be about a man, about a
Yeah.
male character.
You even get some of the female gaze, right? Because just like a woman in the restaurant moves to hit on this guy because
Yeah.
he has
Yeah.
such sensuous lips. And
Yeah.
you don't see it that direction very often.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
that was a fun thing that I wasn't expecting from this book. I was like, okay, Dean
Yeah.
Koontz.
Yeah.
I think you're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it also like really makes that character stand out too, because like how often do you get a character like that where not much is described about them except for their mouth? So like in your head, you're seeing this character in your head with the focal point being his mouth. It's just a weird, you know what I mean? Like it's an interesting way to like describe a character. It really makes him like stand out because they're not usually described that way.
Yeah.
Mhm. So we have been describing this book as a thriller, and I agree with that entirely. But I'm kind of interested and want to poke around at the difference between a mystery and a thriller. Because there is a huge mystery in this book.
Yeah.
The whole point of the book is unfolding this question, but I don't consider this book a mystery novel. It's definitely a thriller. And I think it's because I wasn't trying to solve the mystery. There's no way. Like I didn't have enough clues.
Yeah.
Whereas when you read like Agatha Christie, you're trying to figure it out along with the character.
Right.
But this was felt more action adventure. I knew I was going to get the answer, which was very comforting to me as a reader.
Yeah.
Right.
When you get this kind of mystery, I don't want it to be open-ended.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. A mystery novel, by the time you're halfway through the book, you should technically have all the pieces that you need to solve the mystery, but it's just the lack of kind of information and connecting pieces that is stopping you from doing that. With a thriller, and especially this one, there is absolutely no way that anybody could have figured out this ending before it gets to the point where it's described. Like, unless you're like really good with theories or something, I honestly don't see how anybody could have put the pieces together to figure that out. But yeah, I'd say a mystery. Also, there's less of a feeling of something chasing you. I feel like
a feeling of doom.
Yeah, like a mystery is more like, kind of taking all these pieces, talking to people, collecting information, kind of compiling them all together. And there's certainly, big reveals and big twists and stuff like that too. But a thriller, I feel like there is an ever-present sense of danger. The bad guy is always one step behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're trying to figure out this mystery while this shadow enemy is constantly on your heels and making you sweat and making you, kind of have to stay that one step ahead so you don't die.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm not well read in the genre, but my like gut feeling about it is that there's a lot more action adventure in a thriller versus a mystery. Like a mystery is more solving the question,
Right.
and a thriller is more like being chased from point to point.
Yes.
Having these action scenes as you eventually get to answer the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I
as
totally
a
agree.
counterpoint, we've read the Vinyl Detective series, which is, I would call mystery, but there are definitely action sequences in those books.
I'm not saying there's like mysteries can't ever have action sequences.
Okay. I just wanted you to say it out loud. Thank you.
No, like, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that I think that thrillers are more defined by that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would call the Vinyl Detective cozy crime more than mystery, but that's just me.
Fine. That is just a subsection of mystery.
Yeah, fine.
Well, before we do move on to the spoiler section, so we can talk about all of those crazy twists and turns.
Yeah.
The question we usually land on, that I often pick on Sara for, but I have more victims now. Why should you read this book? Or who should read this book?
Yes. Okay. So why you should read this book, I feel like, we kind of already went over some of it, but there is a huge kind of just emotional feeling that kind of pervades throughout this book, both in the way that you're empathetic for Joe and his, kind of journey through this book, and you get attached to these characters, but also something about this book. There's these themes that I'm sure we'll talk about in the spoiler section, but there's these themes that also pervade throughout, and it's really fantastic, the feeling that you get while you read this book, because it's very rare that I read either a horror book or a thriller or whatever, and I constantly have this feeling in my chest from the book. And I think I mentioned in one of our notes here that reading this book or listening to it, especially on audiobook, I've read this book several times, and there are parts in this book that make me look over my shoulder a little bit. I just realized we're not on video, so I did actually look over my shoulder. But no, there's moments that make me look over my shoulder and give me a sense of unease. And it's not necessarily a horror book, but there are some scenes in this book that scare the living shit out of me. And it's one of the very few books that have been able to do that. That being said, there's also moments with Joe Carpenter between him and other people where it just hits you right in the heart. Some of this dialogue he has with people, and you feel like there's a real connection between some of these characters, even if they're just on page for a moment. And so I think that the character work is done really, really well, but also it's just good mystery, good reveals. Somebody else hop in here.
I don't know if I can say much more than that, dude. That summed up my thing for me. I think in why people should read this book is, and again, as Spencer said, the emotional attachment that I felt to the storyline was something that's really bar none. It's hard to find anywhere else, and I don't know of many books that I could say that I've had such a powerful investment into the tragedies and into the way that this, I guess, plays out, for lack of better words. Yeah, it's really just stunning.
Yeah. And it kind of leaves you with that after you finish the book. Another one of those rare times where, usually I'll finish a book and I'll kind of feel all the feelings and then it'll go away. This is one of those books that have stuck with me for years. And so every time I think back to this book, I get that feeling in my chest. I get that feeling in my head, and it sticks with you long after the pages have been closed.
Yeah.
This is not answering the question, but something you said reminded me of something I really loved about this book, which is Joe's emotional vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes along with the grief that he's experiencing. And I mean, he's not coping at all. So I wouldn't call him healthy emotionally. But there are times when he encounters other loved ones of people who died in the plane crash that killed his family. And just the connection that he experiences with them was very moving. And I feel like the phrase toxic masculinity gets brought up a lot, and people don't often point out the opposite of that. And I think it should be said that he expresses, like I said, not healthy emotions necessarily, but he's willing to connect with people who've been through the same experiences with him. And I mean, he wouldn't have made it without those human connections. And so good for you, Joe.
Yes.
And that's why you should read this book. All right. I looped it back around. To avoid spoilers, skip to 1:28:32. Wait, so which parts made you look over your shoulder?
That's a good question.
You can tell me now.
Okay, so the scariest scene was when he goes to, God, what's their name? I think it's the Delmans, and Lisa's there, and the husband's like, "Oh, I'll go get us some wine," and he leaves, and he ends up going upstairs, and we don't hear from him for a long time. And the way that he describes the Delman's house is so creepy. He's talking about these 3 like oil lamps and how they're flickering and sending shadows across Lisa's face, and how it looked like the flames made it look like moths were dancing on the walls, and just like the lighting was just very, very well explained. And then it talks about the pots just kind of jangling, and like all of these things by themselves don't, feel like anything significant, but added all together, they create an ambiance of this scene that just affected me so much. And it felt like coming downstairs in the middle of the night when all the lights are off except for one of them. You know what I mean? That's how it makes you feel. I love that scene so much. And so then the husband goes upstairs, don't hear from him for a while until we hear the gunshot. In the meantime, we've been talking about, I don't think they know about it at the time, but they're talking about, this technologic and like all these kind of things that have happened around this plane crash. And then Lisa chimes in with some of the things that she's learned. And the intensity just feels like, oh, they're getting somewhere. We're about to find out something. We're about to find out something. And it gets that like ramped up in you. And then the gunshot happens. And it's like, oh shit, what's going on? He runs upstairs to find this guy has blown his brains out, and he sees the radio there and the clock, and it's going backwards. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on? And I'm sorry, I'm like relaying the whole scene, but I'm just trying to give an example. So then he comes back downstairs, and the wife has eviscerated herself like the other person that he just went and visited. And then Lisa, one of his best friends, takes these oil lamps and covers herself in fire. And he's like, no, like, what the fuck? And you can imagine, how would you react to this? This is absolute insanity. This is nuts. And so he has to leave his friend there, immolating herself, while he runs out the front door. And it's described as, he feels like the cold prickle on the back of his neck, and he's running, trying to get away from it. And Joe even mentions, or the narrator or whatever says, I don't remember opening the door or crossing the threshold. The next thing I knew, I was across the street getting into my car. And that just adds to like how many times, I don't know about you guys, but there's been certain situations where adrenaline is high, or I'm really scared or something. And I'm like, I don't remember the last like 30 seconds or the last minute or whatever. And those kind of things really do happen. And so I feel like it was just like described perfectly. And that whole scene, all of those pieces that I just described all together, just make up this portrait of just something that is so terrifying. And I love it. Love that scene.
Yeah, that was a great scene. Terrifying scene.
That scene is also a really perfect example of how methodical the pacing is in this book.
Yeah.
I mean, it starts with just a very, very sad man. And he's on the beach being sad. And then people are watching him. And he's like, oh, they're cops. They have the wrong guy. And then they don't have the wrong guy. And it just like, so it doesn't slowly escalate. It escalates pretty damn fast, but at such an even
slowly
pace.
Revealed. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you hear about someone who killed themselves, and then you start to see people kill themselves in increasingly violent ways.
Yeah.
And then just the whole book keeps going from there.
I actually feel like that scene, I mean, like, I don't disagree that scene is very creepy, but I feel like that scene for me would have more impact on reread, like knowing what is behind it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely.
Like, because, when I read it the first time, obviously I didn't know how the book was going to end. I didn't know like what was going on. It was
You
just
didn't guess that it was lab-made supernatural children the whole time?
I mean, that was my bad. It was really evident. I should have known. But like knowing that there is this influence, I think you can reread that scene and see the signs that like Koontz puts in there. Like not necessarily that it's this man-made like lab child's killing people, but like you can see that things aren't right.
The effects.
But it's a lot. I think it's more chilling to go back and see exactly what he was doing than you necessarily get on the very first read.
Yeah, I think the first read, it almost comes off as there's something ghostly happening. There's some sort of like supernatural thing.
Which it is in a sense.
Yeah.
I mean, like you do get the sense that it's something spooky is happening. Yeah. But I don't think you get the full like implications, that the full picture.
Definitely.
Yeah, that it's a tortured 7-year-old.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Because I remember reading it the first time and I was just confused. I was trying to figure it out. And of course you can't at that time.
Right.
And so it's, one of those things you just got to keep reading and see.
So I'm curious from you guys, kind of going back to the cops that he saw on the beach and then at the cemetery and stuff. I feel like for me, when I first read it, and I think that Joe Carpenter even says this at some point, he's like, what if I were to take, because he finds that guy in the van, right? And he takes his ID. I feel like if I were to take this ID to somebody, I'd hand it to them only to realize it's my own ID. And so there's kind of this feeling of like, is he really like, is this stuff really happening or is he going insane? Like, did you guys feel that at all?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there's another scene when he makes it to his old work and he has the note that Rose gave him and he talks about that. He's like, I was just so afraid that when I open this note, it's going to be blank and there's going to be nothing there. And it's just me. So I definitely had that feeling several times where I was like, is this really what's happening or is he having a breakdown or what is it?
Yeah.
Well, that sets us up so well for at the end of the book, when we do see that breakdown, when Rose is finally explaining to him like who Nina is and what's been happening with these children. And instead of realizing that he's finally getting the answers he's been looking for, his internal narration is, even she's lying to me.
Yeah.
That to me was just like, oh no.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So what were your guys' guesses kind of going through that first like 75%?
75%. I think the first like half, the only thing I could surmise with it, the plane crash was not what it was, right? Like it was not something that just happened naturally. Something weird was about it. And even further on, it's just so hard to like, it's just one of those things. Like there's no way that you could guess. There's a movie that have you guys seen the movie Malignant? It's a horror movie. No. So I told Spencer, I was like, try and guess what's going on. Like, when you start, try and see. He said that he did. I don't believe him, but it was like one of those things where until you
wait, I don't think I've seen that one yet.
Yes, you watched it with David. You texted me. You watched Malignant. And you're like, I know what's going on.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
yes,
that movie. And so it's one of those things where it's very much like this, where you see something going on, but until you actually see the state that like things are, and when it gets there, it's like not, I wouldn't say eye-opening, but it's kind of thing where you're like, oh my gosh, I did not think that's what happened. Right. So that's my whole feeling this whole book until the end. And again, the first time I read it was so long ago, so it's hard to like
remember
back to those
felt.
Those first emotions. But I do remember like thinking plane crashes, something's weird with it, but anything past that, it's like I don't know quite how I surmised what was going on.
I have to admit that I did at about like the 25% mark. I did look on Wikipedia to see what was going to happen.
Why?
Because
Spencer hates that, dude. I do that all the time. Spencer hates it.
Why? Why would you do that to yourself?
Because I don't enjoy like thrillers, like just psychologically.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy that uncertainty.
Oh.
So I wanted to know how things were going to play out a little bit. And it doesn't like it doesn't affect. I wouldn't do this for every kind of book. It's like specifically through. I did this for Sphere too, for
specifically
example.
for the kind of book you shouldn't do that for.
Yes.
I mean,
my God.
Yes. I'm not saying that people should follow in my footsteps, but I wouldn't finish the book otherwise. Probably.
Really?
Like,
wow.
Yeah, I really don't enjoy those kinds of like psychological things.
Yeah.
I want to be a little more sure that there's going to be some kind of like, if not happy ending, at least satisfactory ending.
Yeah.
I mean, we're lucky we got Sara to read a scary book at all. So
Yes, you are.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I don't like being in suspense. So
we've talked about this. I love being scared when I know what I'm scared of. And I'm like, this super scary book. Yes, I know exactly what's freaking me out at this moment.
No, I just don't. So like I do with thrillers, like I do tend to go on Wikipedia and spoil myself, but I have no regrets because it means that I actually do finish reading the book.
Oh, man.
So I did know what was happening eventually, but
wait, at what point in the book did you look up the ending? Like what was happening before you spoiled it?
I think it was right around the time of the Delmans.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Like I think it was right around then when I was like, okay, I need, things are progressing in a way that means that I'm not going to enjoy myself.
Yeah, if I don't know.
If I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
That's so mind-blowing to me.
It's funny that you say that because there's like whether it's TV or books or there's times where I'll do the same thing and it does not ruin the story for me. Like I'm still happy to read it and I get the same feeling as that I would if I didn't know. And so yeah, to Spencer, that's a foreign object.
Yeah,
that's not even in the realm. But there's been times where I've done exactly what you did and I still like enjoyed the crap out of the book and understood it and did everything else. So I'm in your court, Sara.
Yeah, thank you, Gabe. I appreciate that.
Yes, if I get spoiled on anything, I throw a fit.
I get in trouble. Like, for instance, when the newest Kingstar Tiding book came out, so he started reading it before me. I read really fast. I read it like almost 2 times speed. So I like move through the book super quick.
Yeah.
And I texted him this thing that was like, so like, I did not at the time think that it was a spoiler at all because the last book, it was one of our theories that actually came true. And I texted him, I was like, oh my God, this thing came true. And he's like, why the fuck would you send that to me?
I was so mad.
He was so mad at me, dude. And I could tell he played it nice, but I was like, this dude's like punching a wall right now.
Yeah. It's very rare that I like ever get upset with Gabe.
He was mad at me, dude. And I knew it. I knew it.
That was one of them. And he also spoiled and he didn't know. He didn't, to his credit, he didn't know.
Let me hear this.
But Gabe spoiled a plot point in The Last of Us 2 when I first bought the game.
Wait, what? I've never played that game, dude.
No, you had read an article or something and you were like, oh, is this the game where this happens? And I'm like, fuck you, dude. Like, are you fucking kidding? I was livid.
Dude, this is the first time I've ever heard that from him. Very first time he's ever said that to me. Oh man, I'm so sorry, dude.
No, it's fine. But like at the time I was pissed. I do not like spoilers. If there's like a new TV show or anything, I go way, way, way out of my way to avoid any kind of spoiler.
I don't want someone else to spoil things for me. But if I spoil it for myself.
For yourself, right?
Like that's a choice that I'm making.
That's true. You're not forcing it upon others.
Yeah. So like I will take full responsibility for it. And sometimes I regret it and sometimes I don't. In this case, I didn't regret it. But
and not to psychoanalyze you, but there is an element of taking the control back.
Yes.
Right? Like at this point when this book is at its most uncertain and scary, you're saying, no, I'm going to find out what's happening on my
That's
terms.
a good point. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about a lot of things. I need to be in control.
I don't care too much about spoilers, but I do like being a blank slate. Like I won't read synopses. I don't read the backs of books. If I am going to read something or watch a movie, I like to go in as like I don't watch trailers, like none of that. Because I'm either going to watch it or I'm not. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Dude, I can't watch trailers anymore. They put the whole fucking movie in the trailer. I hate it.
I just saw Barbarian in theaters and knew nothing about it. And when I was looking up how long it was, the search results were like, other people have looked for all of these horror movies. And I was like, oh, this is a scary movie. I didn't even know. Like, I love that. Just knowing absolutely nothing.
Blank slate
Yeah.
as you go in there. Yeah.
I accidentally looked at the summary for Soul Survivor and apparently misread it because I thought Joe was the sole survivor.
Yeah, I mean,
I was
that's-
like, oh, he's the only survivor from his family. He was on the plane.
Okay, so I'll be honest. I do remember this. The first time I read this book, when he was in his Honda and having the panic attack about being on the plane, I swore that he was on the plane.
Oh, really?
And so I thought the same thing. I was like, this
Mhm.
guy's describing what happened on the plane. So he was on the plane. Of course, I figured that out later, but I knew that he was on that plane. He wasn't.
So that was a twist that wasn't even supposed to be a twist.
Yeah.
So wait, Lily, did you think that he was on the plane? Is that the way you understood it?
I
Like,
mean,
from the
I figured
synopsis?
it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
think the way it's described is like he's the only member of his family that survives a plane crash, which is a
Oh,
very
okay.
unclear way
Interesting.
to describe it. It's
That
true.
is-
But I
That
could
is
see how
really
I
weird.
could see. Yeah, I could see how that could be misread though,
Yeah.
for sure.
The interesting thing though is that like it kind of shifts. Like at the beginning of the book, like he is the sole survivor. Like he is the one,
Yeah, good
Mhm.
point.
he is the one that is left from his family, and he is completely on his own in life and just barely surviving. Like he's just barely getting by. And so he's, the sole survivor. But then it makes the title even more like poignant when you find out that Rose is really the sole survivor.
Yeah,
Right?
Mhm.
Except that even that's not true because there's
that's true.
Nina.
Yeah, you got Nina. Yeah, definitely.
The wrong Nina.
Yeah.
Yeah, the wrong Nina.
Yes, not the right Nina.
Although I really did like the way that she decided to take Nina's name.
That was so
Yeah.
cute.
That was so
yeah,
great.
Me
that,
too,
like
me
that
too.
was really cute.
Yeah.
Does Koontz have kids? He writes kids too
Yeah.
good to not
he
have
probably
kids.
does.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would think that he does.
He's got kids and lots of dogs.
Yeah.
Read the Watchers.
Yeah. You've already convinced me.
I know.
Yeah.
I
You'll
can't wait
love
to
it.
see how you
Yeah.
guys think. Like, I'm serious. Like, we need to do an episode on that.
Yeah.
It'd be so much fun.
So Lily, I got to know, going back to my question, like Sara spoiled herself, so that doesn't count. Lily, what were your theories? What were your
Oh.
theories going through? Like, did you go from like ghost to this, like train of thought?
I very specifically was like, as soon as supernatural is an answer, you never know. Like, because
Yeah.
there aren't rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be anything. And indeed, it was both genetically modified supernatural children and also God is real.
Yeah.
So, like, how are you going to get both of those
Yeah.
things?
There's
Yeah.
no way.
Same time.
There's no way.
So I was just like, yeah, I have no fucking clue. Let's find out.
Yeah.
I didn't even
Oh,
try.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it.
I remember when I first read it, I was convinced that it had something to do with ghosts because I was like, I know, like in ghost
Mhm.
lore, that clocks get all messed up when there's a ghost nearby. So like
And the cold air and the
And the
flickering
cold air,
lamps.
yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things that I think makes this book extra cool is that there is like a clear villain, but when you are actually finding out the answer to the mystery of what happened to flight 343, I think was the number, the flight that Joe's family was killed on.
353.
Thank you.
353.
There's not like a bad guy there because first you find out that the pilot just like crashed the plane on purpose. But then the pilot's not the bad guy because he's clearly being affected by something. And Joe even says he's clearly a victim as well.
Yeah.
And then you find out he was mind controlled. So you're like, yeah, obviously he's the victim. And then you find out the person mind controlling him was
Is not the
also a victim.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Or, yeah, it is. Exactly.
It just makes it so much more, your emotions around this murder of a lot of people becomes so much more complex because so many people involved were not doing it on purpose necessarily, but
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Some were, I would say. Like, there's definitely like, I mean, the kid wasn't, but like, I feel like there's like a chain of command that just goes up, right? You have the people that were handling the kid, you have the people that were paying the people to handle the kid, and there's like this just enormous like pyramid of people that it leads up to, and that, I mean, it's it could be endless pretty much.
And like even the government was using the kid for like spec ops,
wet
and
work,
stuff.
exactly. Like there's this the whole thing about it. It's wild.
It makes it feel like the system is the bad guy instead of a specific person.
Yes.
Sarah disagrees.
well, no, I don't disagree that it doesn't feel like a specific person, because you're right. All of the individuals that we see are not really to blame. Like they are all victims, but the corporation certainly is the villain. And like there's no bones about it. Like they're the villain.
Technologic.
Yeah, Technologic is the villain, whatever way you look at it. So
for sure. But what about like, so you have Technologic, but what about the outside influence from government or whatever else? Like, do you think government could sway, like say, listen, we know you have this asset, we want you to do this, here's $1 billion type thing? That's the way that I thought about it.
I'm sure that there's that influence, but because we don't see that directly, I still see Technologic as the ultimate villain in this scenario.
That's fair.
Sure.
And everything else is just kind of speculation about what kind of interest the government has in them and who is involved, et cetera, et cetera. Like, but the corporation is definitely like they're doing bad things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Trying to kill Joe and trying to kill Rose. All that stuff is bad.
They're just doing bad things.
Yes.
Torturing children.
Yeah, for real.
I feel like because it's an organization that makes it more complicated. I mean, it's a bad organization. I feel comfortable saying that.
Yes.
But when you come to like trying to figure out, because part of the mystery is Joe trying to find out who is to blame for his family's deaths. And the ultimate answer is there is no who. It is a rotten system.
I think the ultimate answer is Technologic.
That's not a person.
Corporations are legally people, aren't they?
Yeah, but I disagree with that fundamentally, so I can see complaining.
I mean, yes, it's not a simple answer of there being, one person who's to blame. Like that's not this kind of story, or this isn't that kind of story.
Yeah. And I'm saying that's a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Like I want it to be a single person. I would love for it to come down to this boiling point where this is the bad guy, but this isn't one of those stories. Just like you said, it's very kind of blanketed badness just around the whole thing.
But it is interesting to find out about this kid, because you would think that, behind the scenes, whoever is doing all this, it's like this one person sitting in a room doing it telepathically, like adult person. But to find out that it's like this, 8-year-old kid or whatever that they're forcing to do this, but has also become an absolute monster. Like the kid is not like a good person in any way being forced to do bad things. He's being forced to do it, but he wants to
destroy.
Like
he wants to kill all these people that hurt him.
Yeah.
But I mean, he does, but also that's because his circumstances have taught him that people are monsters.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've definitely stumbled onto a nature versus nurture.
Yeah. Definitely.
Like, I don't think there's a good answer. Actually, one of my few issues with the book is that we don't know what happens to this kid.
Yeah.
Which is a question that I guess we don't, like, the book really is about like Joe's evolution. So we don't, from that point of view, like we don't need to know. But personally, as a reader, like I have a lot of questions about what happens to him and what happens to a bunch of other people, which, we don't necessarily get answers for either.
And I think that part of that is because, without giving too much away, I do believe that Technologic, it might be under a different name, but it does come up in other books of Dean Koontz.
So I sorry that this came up now, but at the point where he is visiting the gravesite, he mentions he sees a family of 3 with a Labrador. That is the Watchers. That is the Watchers family there.
You think so?
I'm positive, dude. The way that it said was not like how I would think a normal person would say it. It was very much to that. So I don't believe that there's not connections there. There's got to be several.
Yeah, it had to be a nod.
Yeah.
Dean Koontz Expanded Universe.
Yeah, pretty much something like it. Because there's other books that we've read where we've seen like, oh, there's the pub that came up in the other book,
Yeah, yep.
Because we read Lightning, right? And Lightning was one where this like kind of dive barish connection came up. and we're like, oh, that was in Watchers, and like they're, so I'm on board with that. I definitely felt a couple times where I was like, that's happened before, or that's in a different book.
And even like Infiniface, like making fake passports and stuff for people. And the way that it described like how they do it in this book was the same as like how it's done in Watchers.
Yeah.
Like they're taking real people who were alive at one point and like making that Joe Carpenter's new ID.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to what they're doing in Watchers. And so, yeah, I do think that there is some connections there. And I would be interested to dive more of Dean Koontz's works to see if Technologic ever gets taken down or what. But I think that this is kind of like one slice of the pie in kind of like this extended universe, like you said.
And I actually think that's really cool when an author has a bunch of standalone novels that are, if you choose to read them together, interconnected.
Yeah.
Because I think it takes a lot of talent to make something that has those connections, but also stands on its own.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the important thing to me, because I hate something that I feel like I have to do homework in order to read.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
I think watch. Like,
Yeah.
I think there's more like cinematic universes.
Yeah.
That is the bigger problem.
Like the
there.
Marvel MCU. Like
Yeah.
that thing is just,
Yeah.
that's all homework, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
all
not
of
going
it.
to do homework to watch a movie.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when an author or any creator does that kind of interconnected reference really well, it means you don't have to. But if you
Yes.
have, then it's nice.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. I agree.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
like, and like I don't feel this way for Dean Koontz because this is the only book of his that I've read, but I like when there are references in books that just they make the work deeper without you having to understand them.
Yeah.
Like if you understand them, great, they add another layer of depth to
Yes.
what you're reading. But if you don't understand them, if you haven't read the other works, fine, like you're not missing out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, I totally agree. And that's how I felt reading that one excerpt about the, like it was kind of, it's hard to explain, but it was just what you just said. Like it was something that like, if I read the book, I knew, but I also felt that it was significant, even though like if I didn't read this book, like it was kind
Yeah.
of just a weird
Mhm.
thing. I don't know if any of you guys
Right.
remember that scene. So, I mean, it was super fast. It was before he met Rose at the graveyard. And
Mhm.
he's just like, oh, I
Yeah.
saw family and their kid and their Labrador.
Yeah.
And he says that specifically. And I'm like, that's the Watchers for sure. But I was
Yeah.
also like, there's more to that than he's just saying, you know?
Yeah.
That's also at a point in the book where Joe is, I would say, in the depth of his grief.
Yeah.
Like he's
Yeah,
not
let's talk
distracted by
about this.
anything else.
Yeah.
And so his perception of things,
Could,
he
Yeah.
admits, is weird.
yes.
Yeah.
And so he dwells on these details. He just found out he might be being followed by people. And so I agree that it comes up and he focuses on it. But when I read that, I was like, oh, he's seeing significance in things
He's like
that are.
searching
Yeah,
kind of
right.
behavior like he was
Searching
talking about.
behavior, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
That's
finding
fair.
out that there's more to it than that is very cool, because it did
Yeah.
stand out. But I was like, oh, it's just
Of
he's
course.
just having
Yeah.
a bad
Yeah.
day.
You won't know unless
Right.
you've read
Yeah.
it. Definitely.
Yeah, I really like the graveyard scene because, and it even mentions this in the text, but up to this point, he's just kind of been like, it says like he's waiting to die. Like he is just this person who has nothing to live for anymore, and he is just waiting to go. And then the graveyard scene happens, and it even says like Joe felt invigorated in a way that he hadn't in an entire year. And I love this kickoff point where all of a sudden, you know, he has something not necessarily to live for, but he has something to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he has something to unravel, something to take part in that isn't wallowing in his grief. And then from there, and I feel like that's kind of a big theme of the book is, you know, getting back on your feet, finding purpose again, because he kind of gets invigorated by this whole thing. And then he gets on this mission once he thinks that Nina might be alive. Yeah. He's like, I got to find my daughter. My daughter is out there. And so that gives him a renewed purpose. And then we get to the end, and it's not his daughter, but he has this child who is, you know, as we see in those final pages, this child who is very special to him, who he recognizes is not Nina, but that doesn't mean that she's not incredibly important to him.
Yeah.
And he kind of has this renewed sense of life, both with Infiniface kind of moving him around from place to place, and this girl who he gets to look after now, but also this purpose that this girl is providing. In a way, he is taking her from group to group, showing them the, you know, the blue sky thing that she is showing everybody else. And so he finally feels like his life has some sort of meaning again. And I think that it resonates so well because I don't know how many of you guys, if any of you guys deal with depression, but I certainly have in the past. And while you're in the middle of it, you do feel like there is no purpose to anything. Like you could just go and like nothing would matter. Like nothing matters anymore. And then when you do find something to give you that purpose, it is kind of like this whole chain of events. And I feel like he portrayed that really, really well in this book.
Yeah, that was really, really well said. I totally agree. There's not much more I can say on top of that, dude.
I mean, Koontz's appreciation for mental health struggles, maybe appreciation is the wrong word, but you really see him.
Awareness of.
Yeah, he deals with it in such a considerate way. You know, Joe's entire spectrum that he goes through. I mean, he really runs the gamut of emotions, except for happiness. I guess at the end he's happy, but
yeah.
And Koontz really, I think, is thoughtful with that. I mean, there have been some very bad depictions of mental health just in general. And so seeing it done in a way that is, it doesn't shy away from it, but also doesn't feel exploitative.
It's a way of like working through it, you know, like working through the issue.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very compassionate.
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
Yes.
And also something that struck me even before I finished reading the book is like I flipped to the last page and there's a link, not a link, but he gives the information for
Compassionate Friends, I think.
Compassionate Friends.
Yeah, the Compassionate Friends, which is a group, a self-help organization for people who have lost family members.
Yeah.
And like just seeing that, I was really, even before I had read a lot of the book, I was very impressed by seeing that, just because this is a resource that if you're going through anything like what Joe is going through, like it could help. And I guess having a link to a self-help group at the back of your book is a really low bar.
Yeah.
But
it doesn't feel like pandering.
No, but it's
because
it's very meaningful.
This is the group that Joe specifically like had sought help from. And so we saw not his interactions, but it doesn't necessarily help him, but because it's involved in the story and was part of his journey to sort of work through this trauma, it doesn't feel like it's like just thrown in at the end there. It's, hey, this is a real thing. And just because it didn't help Joe, he even in the story said it helps a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so it felt a lot more meaningful than just like, here's a URL.
Yeah. But even if it hadn't had such relevant links to the story, I don't know. I feel like there are plenty of stories that deal with similar issues in a more surface way that don't include any kind of like resource like that. So on that level too, like I give Dean Koontz props.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and in the audiobook, like at the end, they, at least to me, they specifically separated this point where they talked about, what did we just say? Compassionate Friends. And they said, here's the phone number. This is the address. You can write to them. They will respond, like all this stuff. And it was like really just like, that's, you know, where do you find those extra steps taken?
Yeah.
Because that's what it was. It was extra steps that were taken to help somebody possibly in need. And it was really, really cool.
It felt genuine.
Yes, exactly. It was very real, very honest. And it was just really nice to hear at the end of that book.
Yeah, it honestly, I mean, when I was flipping through the book, again, before I really had read any of it, like it was not what I had expected from a popular fiction thriller.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
it's a little ironic. Sorry to ruin the vibe. It's a little
it's all
ironic
good.
that I have always referred to Dean Koontz as airport novels.
Oh, yeah,
I
definitely.
can kind of see why, though.
Yeah. But I mean, there's something that you can just pick up and read, and it'll sure kill time on a flight.
Yeah.
And then this book is all about a whole
Yeah.
airplane, just getting demolished.
Oh, yeah.
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 That
Whoops.
sucked.
I mean, you're still not wrong though.
That's true.
True. Yeah.
And that's what's interesting about this book, because I've read a bunch of his novels, and I would agree. He's definitely an airport novel kind of guy. And that's why I'm so loud about this book, because I feel like a lot of people have like these preconceived notions about Dean Koontz, like, oh, he's like a James Patterson or somebody that you see at airports. But this book, I really do feel like this book is so different than what you would typically expect from something like that. And I would say that this book is even different than a lot of his other works. Surely Watchers is very similar to this book. Like, I do believe that if you enjoy this book, you will certainly enjoy Watchers. They're very similar in that way. But I've also read a bunch of his books that are not great. What was the one I read? I forget. There was one I read where all these people were living on a ranch and there was aliens. and it did feel like, kind of that airport read, just, read it for a quick, like 6 or 7 hour flight or whatever. And that's kind of just what it is. But I feel like this really does sit apart from that.
Yeah.
I had some quotes if you would like to hear what some of my favorite quotes are.
I would love to.
Okay. So starting near the beginning, there's this, when he sees the 14-year-old boy and he's in the bathroom and he's asking the kid to go out and look for the officers or whatever. He's like asking the kid, like, what's your name and all this stuff. And the kid's like, I don't have to tell you. He's like, my parents live their own lives. I go where I want. He says, you go where you want, but you don't have anywhere to be. The kid made eye contact again. In his bruised stare was a glimpse of hurt and loneliness so deep, Joe was shocked that anyone should have descended to it by the tender age of 14. Anywhere to be? What's that supposed to mean? Joe sensed that they had made a connection on a profound level, that a door had opened unexpectedly for him and for this troubled boy, and that both of their futures could be changed for the better if he could just understand where they might be able to go after they crossed that threshold. And then it kind of goes on to talk about how when you are in the state that Joe is in, it's very difficult to give to anyone else. And like, when so much has been taken from you emotionally and in any other sense, it's incredibly difficult to give anything back. And so he kind of says that in this paragraph. He says he had no belief to share, no wisdom to impart, no hope to offer, insufficient substance to sustain himself, let alone another. He was one of the lost, and the lost cannot lead. And man, that quote just hit me so hard. And then there's some really good prose in this book when he leaves the bathroom after he had like crushed the cockroach and beat the shit out of that guy. Like, hey, I guess it happens, right?
Yep.
It says, choking on self-loathing as much as on the fetid air, he walked out of the reeking building into an ocean breeze that did not refresh and a world as foul as the lavatory behind him. Woo!
Yeah.
Man, that's a good piece of prose right there. And then as he took some of the beach's sand with him in his shoes, he hoped to take the ocean's indifference with him in his heart.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do any of you guys like this prose?
Oh, of course. And there's much more than that too. There's several points in this book where I was very much, I guess, not really changed, but like moved by the prose. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the book swung wildly for me. Like,
oh, really?
I agree that those quotes were incredible. And there were a lot of very emotional moments and very good points of prose. And just the opening couple of pages had a lot of similes, had a lot. And I was like, I get I get it. The waves are like a something or other.
Yeah.
Please stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it was just a rough open, because once I got into the book, and I feel like once Dean Koontz got into the book,
Yeah.
he eased back from that quite a bit.
Yeah.
But it was a lot on the first page.
So were some parts like too like kind of poetic or purple for you?
It was just, there were a couple of paragraphs where every single noun was like it was this other thing. And so it was too much concentrated for me.
Okay, I see.
I definitely thought, I mean, I liked the prose in general, but I did think that it sometimes got a little flowery for my taste. I enjoyed it a lot more so I read this book Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening. Saturday afternoon, I was reading with tea. Saturday evening, I was reading with wine. I enjoyed it a lot more when I was reading it Saturday evening with wine.
I think I enjoyed the prose, and I mean, the book in general really shined when it was discussing human interactions and those really emotional moments that we have all said really struck us in this book.
Yeah.
The scenery description was where I was like, all right.
I mean, I did actually really enjoy his descriptions of how he, like, his relationship with the water.
Yes, but that was also emotional.
It was emotional.
That wasn't just like the clouds were this color, like as if it was this other thing.
Yes, it did have an emotional component. This is true.
See, that's so funny, because I think one of my like favorite things about this book is the description of like the scenery, and like when he's walking on that boardwalk and talking about how there was just something really unsettling about all these people around a campfire, and it felt like everybody was watching him, and the flames from the campfire looked like, you know, whatever he compares them to. And I just I feel like that set the scene so much for me. But I'm also like one of those people that really like my environments described in great detail. There's a lot of people that don't like their character descriptions or their characters like described a whole lot, and their landscapes. But I swing way the opposite way. I really like it. Like when he's at the gas station after the scene on the boardwalk where he throws his bag into the fire, it says, he turned and studied the side of the service station again, where the exaggerated and weirdly distorted shadows of moths washed across the white stucco like nightmare phantoms gliding through the pale mists of a dream. Like that, I don't know why. That just like, I love that. I absolutely like, I don't know.
And that was very good. I think the moments where I got frustrated were when it came like a lot at once.
Yeah. Fair.
When he let me sit with it.
Yeah.
When it was like, there's this one image and you have to stop and think about it. That was very moving. But when it was just like simile after simile.
That's fair.
I was like, this was just too much for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think we are maybe different readers in that aspect, though.
For sure.
And that's great.
Yeah.
That's what this is about.
Well, can I end us on my favorite quote, which is the last little couple sentences of the book?
Absolutely.
Okay. In time, he opened his eyes. His daughter smiled at him. Her eyes were amethyst, not gray. Her features were not of those of the other Nina, whom he had loved so deeply. She was not, however, a pale fire, as she had seemed before, and he wondered how he could have allowed his anger to prevent him from seeing her as she truly was. She was a shining light, all but blinding in her brightness, as his own Nina had been, as are we all.
Boom. Drop the mic.
There it is.
I am glad that he does seem happy at the end.
Yes.
We go through so much with Joe, and it's like I'm glad that he found somewhere to feel needed and exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of questions, but I also am glad that he's happy.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
This is the kind of book where you're like, man, I wish that there was like a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Just a touch more of what we can learn about what happened or why it happened.
Yeah.
But
I just want like the side novel that details what happens to all of the other characters who are talked about.
You want the
For
end
sure.
credits montage where it's like still
Yes.
frame.
Exactly.
10 years from now, blah blah blah, went to med school.
Exactly.
That'd be perfect. Yeah. I think I said in one of our notes here that I was like, I could have used, because I think the audiobook was like maybe if you're reading on one speed, I think it's like a 10-hour audiobook. I probably could have.
8.5, I think. On
8.5.
Yep.
I probably could have used another like 4 hours of the book. Honestly, that's just me, but I think it could have fleshed out a lot of that a lot more. And I don't think I needed like the destruction of Technologic, although that would have been cool. Like I would have loved to see like what would happen if he got to the facility and had to decide whether to kill this boy who is using his telepathic powers. Like that would have been like a really interesting scene and a really interesting like dilemma. But at the end of the day, I think for me, like I didn't quite need that because like we said earlier, I think the story was so much more about his personal journey and him trying to become like a whole person again and trying to get back to his family, even though that's not possible. And, you know, like I mentioned a little while ago, like this renewed purpose with this other Nina that he's taking care of now. I think the story was like so centered around that it almost would have felt cheap if he had gotten like the good ending with Nina and then it proceeded to like tell us how he takes down Technologic, because I think the way that it ends with him and Nina on the beach is so wholesome and peaceful. It's exactly where we want this character to be, that I think that it would have felt like one of those cheap thriller suspense, like techno thriller novels if he had like, you know, murdered his way up the corporate command of Technologic.
Yeah, can't do that.
So I actually conversely had very little interest in knowing what happened to Technologic as a company.
Okay.
Like that wasn't where my questions lied. I wanted to know, I mean, I did want to know what happened with the little boy.
Okay.
Yeah. For sure.
But it was also like, what happens to Barbara? What happens with Beth, his mother-in-law? Like what happens with the really nice receptionist / security guard who works for the post?
Yeah, Dewey.
Who has this really supportive like line, you know, that he says to Joe that really makes you feel for him, like that he cares about Joe as a friend. Like that's the kind of stuff that I wanted to know about, which.
So it does say that he continues Rose's work. So I would guarantee that he's going to all those people with Nina. Like I guarantee he went to, what was her name? Beth, and gave her like the handshake and all that.
For the loved ones of the survivors. Yeah.
I guess Beth, I could see him like still being in contact with Beth, but I don't know if I can see him being in contact with Dewey, because Dewey was
probably not Dewey.
Yeah. I mean, Dewey's just a security guard.
Yeah.
/ receptionist.
Definitely.
I love the idea of seeing what happens with Technologic, but I feel like that's not Joe's story.
Yeah.
They would have to swap perspectives to the person who would be doing that. Maybe that's Nina in 20 years.
Right.
And I think that's the story, right?
That would be a great
That would
story.
be awesome.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel like Joe has been struggling to find his place. And I think he has. And so him running off to become an action hero would not feel right.
Wouldn't line up.
Yeah.
He's a dad. He starts as a dad and he ends as a dad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that in that last sentence there was nothing to suggest in that final chapter that he had been referring to her as his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And then that just one of those last sentences
daddy,
there, he's like, she says daddy, and he's like, he looked upon his daughter and is like, oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heartwarming.
Yeah.
And after everything that book put us through, we deserved that ending.
We
Yes.
we deserved that. Hell yes.
Do we want to take a minute to talk about how ridiculous the word infiniface is?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yes. Because I think that was maybe supposed to be a very good portmanteau.
It's bad though.
It's
like
bad.
it doesn't as a portmanteau, you don't know what it's talking about.
I'm going to ask the same thing Gabe's
Okay, all
about to
right,
ask.
ask it.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. What's a portmanteau?
It's when you smush two words together,
And I
basically.
think it's gonna. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be information and interface
Oh, okay.
are
I
smushed
see.
together
Okay.
into
Yes. Okay.
Infiniface.
Infiniface. Gotcha.
Right.
It
gotcha,
sure sounds
gotcha.
like Infinity Face, though.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It totally does.
I think that even that kind of works too, because they have all these agents everywhere and you never know like where they're going to be. I feel like that's kind of what it's playing on as well.
It seems so much more grand than it is, though, with the name.
Yeah, like if that was
Isn't it
what
grand?
they were going for, then they should have just had it been like that in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It comes up because this is the other organization that's like, I was about to give a spoiler and this is not in the spoiler section. So I'm going to fix that sentence. It's a very secretive organization that does some very important, like, super spy stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you're doing what to your face? I'm sorry. The whole time. It just made me giggle. And I don't think that's the vibe it was
Yeah,
supposed to be.
I would totally
Right,
agree.
for sure.
It's hard to name things and sometimes it falls flat a little bit.
That's true. You just got to roll with what you got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did kind of laugh when they said it was poor man's Bill Gates.
Yes.
too.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they were. Not spoilers. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for coming on to talk about Soul Survivor with us. We had an absolute blast. It's always fun hanging out with you,
Yeah.
but this has just been brilliant. Before we give you back your evening, can you tell us what you have going on, like what to look forward to on your podcast, and also where you can be found on the internet?
So yeah, obviously we're Fantasy Files Podcast on YouTube and Twitter, on Twitter at Files Fantasy. What do we have coming up? So by the time this episode gets posted, we will have an interview with Kelcade, who is the author of King's Dark Tidings. You can go back and look at that. We also have some stuff with Mike's book reviews. He's going to be coming on the channel and we're going to be going on his channel, having kind of a crossover thing where we just hang out on the podcast and talk. We're also having Craig from the Legendarium on the podcast in November. So just for like an off-topic conversation about content creation and fantasy and all sorts of stuff. So tune in for that. We also, in November, will be doing a Mistborn Era 2 discussion for all of Mistborn Era 2. That's coming up pretty soon. Oh, and for Halloween, we'll be doing another horror book. So if you like thriller suspense novels, come over to our channel for a minute. We're going to read Hex, Hex by Thomas something. So it'll be great. It's about a witch.
There you go.
But yeah, other than that, we've just started our second channel where we talk about movies, TV shows, and video games. It's called Fantasy Files Reacts. We're not going to be putting videos on there nearly as often as we do on the main channel, but just whenever we, have a show or movie that we want to talk about or a video game, we'll put up some sort of reaction content over there.
And then also, we had just made a Discord server as well tonight.
Yes.
We just did that just now. And so we'll figure that out a little bit later, but Discord's coming and we'll get that figured out.
And we will also link to that in our show notes if you want to join,
Awesome.
as you should,
Yes.
join the Fantasy Files Discord.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. So you can find our stuff on YouTube. I will also be, in the next month or so, I'll also be moving all our stuff over to Spotify because we've been meaning to get over there for a long time now. And I know that that's good for views. So we'll be over on Spotify soon.
Yep.
So keep your eyes on that, probably within, I don't know, the next month or so. I don't know when this is going up. So
I don't think we know either.
Yeah, that's okay. Whenever it happens.
fine.
Whenever it happens.
we're always 4 episodes behind.
Yeah.
And so every episode that you see that goes up has been filmed a month
ago,
or so.
yeah.
I also heard that you guys had these great guests on a little while ago, like these 2 women who do a podcast.
Yes.
What book was that again?
Go ahead, Spencer.
When was that?
I don't know. I've never heard of them. No,
I think the book was by Brent Weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't remember. No, we had you guys on the Way of Shadows, the first book in the Night Angel trilogy. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
As was this. Thank you both again so much for
Yes.
joining us. Can't wait to do it again soon.
For
Yes,
sure.
definitely. The Watchers. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Mark my words.
will.
Do it.
My
Let's
words.
do it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.
Bye.